Welcome to our webinar on advancing portfolio management and impact measurement with Salesforce. My name is Zak Kaufman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions. I'm really excited to be joined today by Steph, Tom, and Joe. Steph from World Animal Protection, Tom and Joe from the Elton John AIDS Foundation. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment here. As mentioned, if you do have questions as we're going along, we want to make this interactive, so do feel free to pop them into the chat feed. We're recording this session, so anybody who might have missed it, we'll be sending out the recording to everybody who's registered. And really excited to be with you all today and digging into this topic. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. It's been really the focus of our work at Vera Solutions over the last 11 years. And I hope that you come away from today with some great new insights around how Salesforce can be really powerful for managing portfolios of programs and grants and projects. And in fact, that Salesforce as a platform can be as powerful for these areas of program management, grant management, impact measurement, as it can for CRM, fundraising, and engagement and marketing, as many organizations are using it for. So without further ado, I will let my fellow panelists introduce themselves. Steph, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to, Zach. Thanks. I am Steph Straszynski at World Animal Protection. I am a PMIS, which is the Project Management Information System Project Manager.
Excellent. Thanks. Tom, you're up next.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. My name's Tom. I lead up our work for people who use drugs, which is a global portfolio of work at the Elton John AIDS Foundation.
Awesome. And Joe, take us home.
Thank you, Zach. I'm Joe. I'm the IT project manager for Elton John AIDS Foundation, and I do everything related to systems and IT across the organization.
Wonderful. So we've got a nice mix of perspectives on the panel and the webinar today. Here's a quick look at our agenda. So I'll be talking at first a bit about our work at Vera and why you should consider Salesforce for program management, portfolio management, and impact measurement. We'll hear from EJAF and from World Animal Protection on how they're using data to understand their impact. And as part of that, we'll hear about how they're using Amp Impact, which is an app on the Salesforce App Exchange, to address some of their pain points and some of the challenges that they had. And we'll hopefully pull out some learnings from those discussions and tackle any questions that you all have along the way. Looking forward to a really rich discussion and hopefully an interactive discussion on our panel today. So to kick us off, let's talk a little bit about Vera and about Salesforce and why we think about Salesforce for these areas of portfolio management and impact measurement. So Vera started just over 11 years ago, and we actually grew out of a nonprofit in South Africa called Grassroots Soccer. And I used to oversee monitoring and evaluation at Grassroots Soccer. And when I stepped into that role in 2008, 2009, I inherited big stacks of paper and Excel spreadsheets galore that we were using to track all of our program participants, changes in knowledge and attitudes related to HIV, testing numbers, and so forth. And it was an organization that was thinking really critically about its impact, but an organization for whom the data systems were really holding it back from being able to get to scale and scaling its impact. And as we had an influx of support coming from the U.S. government, the private sector, and Elton John AIDS Foundation, even back then, we really needed better systems to be able to better understand our impact as an organization and to be able to keep tabs on that and get to scale. We moved on to Salesforce for program management and tracking all of our participants, all of the questionnaire data, attendance, and so forth. And that really just changed the way that the organization was working from, at the time, we had a 3-month lag where data would get entered in from the paper data collection forms. You'd wait 3 months before anybody had visibility on it. And it was just this one-way flow of data from the field to the local office, to the head office, to the funder, really without any strong feedback loops. When we moved that onto Salesforce, all of a sudden we had dashboards that were kicking out across the organization, and we had data at everybody's fingertips that was relevant in informing how are we going to design our programs, where are we having the best bang for our buck, and also just making accountability with our funders and our partners a lot easier and more effortless. So what happened was other organizations started coming to us and saying, this is exactly what we need. How do we do this? And so a couple of us at Grassroots Soccer started helping these other organizations to go through that same kind of transformation. And eventually, quickly, actually, that grew beyond the mission of HIV prevention. And so we spun out Vera Solutions as a B Corp, focused on solving the needs of the sector and really amplifying the impact of the sector using cloud and mobile technology. And we've had the privilege to work with over 350 organizations over the last 11 years, and that's growing as we grow. And amongst those are the Elton John AIDS Foundation and World Animal Protection, two amazing organizations you'll hear a little bit more about in a minute. And really, I think from our end, we've just been incredibly privileged to get to be part of the journey of all these organizations, but also to just learn and see the sector through the different eyes of organizations of different shapes, sizes, and geographies. So one of the things that we started to see by the middle of our lifetime, so by 2015, was there's a real common set of needs and requirements. We found ourselves building the same functionality over and over again when it came to portfolio management and impact measurement. And so we started designing a package solution on the Salesforce platform called Amp Impact, and we launched that on the Salesforce App Exchange in 2017. And now more and more of our work is really incorporating Amp Impact into the solutions that we're delivering. So Amp Impact, what it is 100% native solution to Salesforce. So you install it into a Salesforce system, and it gives you all this really rich out-of-the-box functionality for, on the one hand, managing a portfolio of projects, grants, programs, and their life cycle. So it could be from planning and strategy through to implementation and funding, closeout, all of that, and then the different dimensions of your projects and programs and grants. So the geographies they work in, the thematic areas they're contributing to, the funding profile and picture, scheduling payments, building budgets and tracking expenditure, work planning, risk management. There's really quite a lot to it. And then the other side, tracking impact. So setting up log frames for defining the outcomes and outputs that a project is going to achieve, managing indicators that we're going to use to then measure those outcomes and outputs, setting targets against those indicators, tracking results, bringing out the qualitative aspects of impact with narrative reporting and impact stories, sometimes aggregating or calculating the results from other data. And so this is really what Amp Impact provides. It's a package solution. So it comes with all these different components that we can plug and play and use in different ways. And you'll hear from EJAF and from World Animal Protection how they're using Amp Impact, different components in different contexts to really help solve some of their organizational challenges. And that's a really key aspect of Amp Impact. The last thing I'll say about this before we talk about kind of why Salesforce is that Amp Impact really isn't trying to solve 100% of anybody's needs. It's trying to solve 60 to 70% of everybody's needs for portfolio management and impact measurement. And then the remainder we get to with configuration and leveraging the flexibility of the Salesforce platform. So why we build on Salesforce is an interesting question, because as Vera, we're a mission-driven company. We're trying to change the way the sector works. We're not really married to Salesforce. We just see it as a really, really powerful backbone for the solutions that we're delivering. And it really comes down to these 5 things. So Salesforce is trusted. It's used by most of the Fortune 100 and the Fortune 500. So that means we've got great security. We've got a massive ecosystem around it. It's software as a service, platform as a service. So we don't have to worry about hardware. There isn't necessarily extra software that needs to be managed. It's all one central platform. So that simplifies things from an IT point of view. It's incredibly flexible. The Salesforce mantra of clicks, not code, means that we can set up automation. We can set up analytics. We can really extend a platform in different ways without having to write one line of code. It's great value for NGOs. So they've got a great Power of Us program that if you don't know about it is worth checking out. And they really have quite generous discounts for nonprofit organizations. And it's constantly getting better and better. So Salesforce, is consistently one of the Forbes most innovative companies. And a big part of that is because they listen to customers and what their customers are asking for. The platform has 3 major upgrades a year. And if you're like me and you've been in the ecosystem for the last 15 years, it just gets so much better every year as they're making the platform better and better. We do our best to emulate that with Amp Impact, as well as we also do 3 releases a year to deliver more and more functionality with Amp Impact. Another look at this, and this is the last bit I'll say before handing over the mic, is that if you ask anyone at Vera Solutions why we build on Salesforce, they'll probably pull up this slide, which is a little bit of a geeky slide, but we really think of Salesforce at the core, not just as a CRM tool, but actually as a relational database platform, which means we can manage any kind of data and build connections between those types of data in the system, whether that's your program participants, whether that's your your projects, your indicators, the results you're achieving, your donors, your donations, you name it. Then on top of this, you have all these layers of configurability. You've got an automation layer. So when something happens in the system, we can kick out an email to somebody to a user or to a contact from the system. You've got a configurable user interface. So you can drag and drop to adjust the way the system looks and feels to meet the needs of different users. You've got an analytics layer. So with reports and dashboards, extending that further if you want with Tableau, or extending with other tools for analytics. You can build dashboards that are running automatically, or you can build reports to answer ad hoc questions about your impact. And then you've got a mobile layer. So we build once for the browser, and all of that functionality can be available on phones and tablets. And then importantly, you've got this integration layer, which if we're talking about portfolio management in particular, oftentimes, and you'll hear from Joe, I believe, at EJAF about the integration work they've been doing, connecting to other systems, whether that's a finance system or an HR system or a marketing system, it's some other tools, is really, really critical for systems to get well adopted, and just to save time, make sure that the data that's needed is getting into everybody's hands. Underlying all of this is just further configurability to make sure users have the permissions to do the things we need them to do. You can translate the system into 30 different languages if you need to. There's some great collaboration functionality for bring conversations off of email and onto the data itself. And then you'll hear a little bit about Experience Cloud, or Salesforce Communities, as it was formerly called, where we can set up portals, configurable portals for external stakeholders. So that might be your grantees, that might be your donors, it might be your partners, to really get them to collaborate on data that's relevant for them and exchange with you in really vibrant ways. So I'll stop there, and we can get into the meat and potatoes of this, which is hearing from EJAF and from World Animal Protection about how they're using Salesforce, how they're using Amp Impact, and what kind of learnings we've gotten from that. And I believe, Tom, you're up first from EJAF.
Thanks so much, Zach. And I just want to also put a quick shout out to Hasti, who works in the Mumbai office as well. Has been so helpful in developing our system. And just picking up from where you left off there, Zach, about Amp Impact being a sort of approachable system. I mean, I've been working on our system alongside my main job here, which is in the programmatic side, and doesn't really have too much overlap with systems level work, but I think that's just shows sort of how easy it was to get to grips with Amp Impact from a non-tech person like myself, and also Vera being so supportive through that process to make things sort of clear. So I think it's, for people out there who aren't so tech savvy like me, it's a logical system and very user friendly. I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes about what we do, and a bit about our history, and more about our journey from where we sort of started with managing our data and our impact to the present day where Joe's going to take over. So a little bit about us. We started in 1992. We have offices in the US and the UK. And I think, Joe, we've got about 20-25 people. That's across our grants, fundraising, comms, IT, and our finance team. And yeah, we've since we started, we've given out over 3,000 grants to projects in 93 countries worldwide. So a really global reach. And we're one of the leading philanthropic grant makers for HIV. So we work across North and South America, Africa, Asia, Europe. And yeah, our work really focuses on key communities. And by that, we mean people who use drugs. We mean LGBTQ plus communities, young people, and sex workers. So a real focus on where we see the greatest burden of HIV, and also when looking at the bigger sort of wider HIV sector, it's communities that are being really left behind. So the types of work that we fund really responds to the fact that whilst we've seen a reduction in the number of people dying of AIDS-related illnesses, over 60% of all new infections occur within these communities and their sexual partners. So our grants really support local, national organizations, and they often provide HIV testing, linkage to treatment and care programs, and and we've also pivoted to supporting more advocacy and policy related initiatives, which challenge the legal and the structural barriers that criminalize communities. So what we're really trying to do here is really focus on where there are really key gaps for key communities and people living with HIV. And since 2015, we've supported almost 10 million people with services and provided HIV testing to over 4 million people. And we're also, as I said, we're a fundraising organization as well. And since we began, we've raised over $500 million for HIV globally. That goes straight back into our programs and straight out the door to communities worldwide. We've just embarked on a new 5-year strategy for the whole organization that followed the integration of our US and our UK organizations, which, although with the same name, were separate with separate strategies. So we're now one global organization, and I'll just talk a bit about where we sort of started and came from on this journey. So we started to roll out the AMP Impact system early this year, but obviously last year during COVID, we worked with Vera to develop that. So we really wanted to evolve our processes here at the foundation. And with that new strategy that we brought in, we wanted a system to sort of help us on that journey. Really at the early days of the foundation, and this is before my time, I started here about 8 years ago, our database really consisted of Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, which grantees would fill out, email back to us, we'd save them. So, you know, pretty analog compared to what we have today, but that was the system that we had. As we sort of developed our strategy here as well, we wanted to turn that into a system. So we went to, I don't know why, but there was a reason behind this, I'm sure. We worked with a system called LawBase, which was a platform that legal practices organizations use to store casework, I guess. But we sort of modified it to be a sort of grant management system. And then thankfully, we teamed up with Vera Solutions back in 2011. And as Zak was saying, as things were growing on their side, we worked with Vera to develop a platform within Salesforce, a sort of custom built platform, which really mirrored where we wanted to go as an organization. We wanted to collect key data points from our programs and compare these across portfolios. So where we have a portfolio for people who use drugs or a portfolio for sex workers, they're all doing testing. How do we sort of compare that? How do we compare data points and information across regions? We really wanted to improve the programs that we fund, but also to share that with the grantees so they could have a good sense of what they were doing. We also wanted really a more user-friendly, intuitive platform, one that could also manage payments, deadlines, and be a sort of store of attachments and reports. So this was based on the standard Salesforce system. We were staying in classic mode for a bit too long, which we probably should have moved off that. So that was our choice. And I think a key part of what we were trying to do through this system was that we wanted to link up our sort of higher level organizational mission and come up with ways that all of our programs, no matter where they were or who they were working with, had a key set of indicators which would ladder up to that. So we could really tell from the data that we were collecting how we were progressing towards our top level goals as an organization. So we came up with this idea of higher level goals that every organization would report back on. So that was the number of people tested for HIV, the number of people linked to HIV treatment programs, and the number of people retained in treatment programs. So this was all, our big sort of organizational view was no more AIDS deaths and key communities, you know, not being left behind in the AIDS response. So by tracking those, we could see how we were progressing to this top level goal. So this system really did help us with that. It was also using FormStack as well, which was fine. It was a workaround. It was a fix. There were still some issues with that. I think importantly as well, there was no place for grantees to log in. There's no sort of portal, a place they could call their own, where they could sort of manage their project from. And as I said, as our strategy evolved and as our grant making has become more targeted and a lot more nuanced as well, we fund service programs where we are tracking data such as the number of people tested for HIV, but we're also now tracking more qualitative information and milestone related targets, for example, when we're working in advocacy and policy spheres. So we really wanted to take this to the next level, and that's where AMP Impact really came in. So again, we worked with Vera to take our strategy and see what AMP Impact could do for us there, and it really has opened up our grant making. It's given us so much more flexibility and freedom in terms of what is possible. One thing I really like as a programs person, and for anybody on the call who's like a bit like me, where the grant cycle and the grant management process, you know, can be a bit stressful sometimes. We created, for example, a place where we could create a call for proposals online and store all the information about that there. That will be then mirrored in a portal for grantees. So grantees now, through AMP Impact, they have this online place, a place that they can log in, they can see all their grant information, all their upcoming payments, all their data. So the data is owned by them as much as it is by us. So it's really been a massive boost for us and the way we can manage that grant cycle, especially being a small team working remotely. And it's just really helped us simplify. It's a very much an ongoing piece, but yeah, I'm going to now pass over to Joe, who's going to pick up from there about how we're using it right now.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so Tom's talked about our need for a new solution, and so I'll just talk about where we are now and the reason we're using this new solution. And as Tom says, one of the key factors of this new solution is the grantees portal, and it's been a great tool for us in terms of creating a strengthening collaborative effort with our grantees. And not only that, it's the ease of use for our users has been incredible. And as Tom says, it's an easy place for them to feel connected to the grants and for us to feel connected to the grantees as well. And so it's providing with much more of a partnership. And then we can also be closer in terms of admin and management of the grants through this portal. But yeah, the real reason for us to move to this new solution was so that we could have this wider picture that Tom alluded to, and talking about the overall strategy for the organization. We needed something that was more in line with what we're going to be doing going forward with this new 5-year plan. We needed a place that we can have portfolio management and impact management and grant and fund management all in one place, and the ability to track these KPIs that we have, but also look at them in a much more granular level, which is across the organization, which is where we have integrated our solution with Power BI. And this has been great for us, and going forward, it'll be even better that we are able to track our progress and really analyze our data across the organization, from our fundraising department through to our grants department and our finance department, as they all interlink into Power BI. And the new solution that we've got with AMP Impact has really helped us be a bit more sophisticated in our analysis and our reporting, as I've said, and it allows us to have one centralized area for all of our analysis across the organization. And more so than that, it gives us an instant update across every department for what it is we need to look at. So it's more transparent, and we can customize our reporting across everything. But one of the major projects of this, using the new solution with AMP Impact, as Zach mentioned previously, was our finance integration. So we have managed to fully integrate our finance system, which is Business Central, into AMP Impact so that we can track payments. And this all then leads into our integration with Power BI, so we can report across finance and grants all into one place. And we've done the same for our fundraising system and Business Central as well. So we can actually report across the entire organization, from where our donors' money is coming from to where it's actually being used globally, which is a great piece of data to display for internal purposes, for grantees, for grant managers, but also for board members and sharing with the wider public as well, if need be. But this project was obviously a major project for us, and it came with a lot of difficulties along the way, as every project does. One of the great things about Salesforce and AMP Impact, as Zach mentioned, was the fact that it's such a flexible system, and you can change anything that you wish very easily. But with that comes problems that you need to make sure that you have validations and checks in place for all these sorts of things. So some of our benefits and reflections and learnings in this slide is on that, is talking about having clear internal business processes before starting any major system work, and making sure that your system, it doesn't dictate what it is you're looking to achieve as your overall goal. Because we're looking at this bigger picture of being able to analyze across the organization, display that in a way that is sensible and clear to everybody across the organization. So you have to ensure that you have your internal business processes refined. But one of the great things of the system as well is the efficiency that we have in this. And this comes down to reporting, but also for grantee ease of use through the portal, things like that. That's been super helpful for everything. And as I say, running into Power BI, we get instant updates on everything like that. But one of the key factors, I guess, in everything is, as it's popped up there, is security. With this flexible system, you need to ensure, if you're integrating across systems, that you have your validations in check so that we're not getting incorrect data. Because as we know, bad data in means bad data out. So we want to ensure that that's as limited as possible. And that's what happens when you're changing business processes. One of the major impacts, I guess, during the project, and one of the things that we found took more time and had a bit of a bigger impact than we suspected, was obviously COVID-19. The ability to have a meeting face-to-face was obviously removed completely, which brought us challenges, of course, but we've managed to persevere, thankfully, through that. And we've gone through it. But that is one of the big things, is that it's taken us longer than we expected. And there are many points during this process that we have found that real world issues pop up and have a major impact on your project plan that you probably would never have thought about. And I don't think there are issues that nobody can really think about until they're in play. So yeah, that is generally some of the biggest challenges that we've had going through this project. One interesting issue that's popped up there is our need for a fund object, which I believe we managed to persuade Vera very kindly to fast forward their roadmap due to our need for it, which was founded by the integration with our finance system. As I say, working with Vera has been super flexible, very efficient. They're a great team, and on the Salesforce system, it really was simple enough for us to add that in, obviously with a lot of tweaking and testing that went into that. But that is the flexibility of the system really allowed for that. And as I say, the real world issues, there'll always be things that you can never foresee going forward in a project. You'll think you've thought of everything, but then there'll be something that pops up 5 years after you've gone live on your new system. But I would just say not to worry about that, and just continue as the plan goes along, and hope you have a good team like Vera to mitigate any damages that can come up from that. But those are some of our key benefits, reflections, and learnings from our process.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom and Joe. It's really great to hear about that journey, from paper, from documents in your guys' case through to Salesforce Classic through and web forms. Still kind of that one-way flow of submissions coming through to a more collaborative grant-making system with Amp Impact and Experience Cloud. Great to see how integration plays into the solution there, both with Power BI and with Business Central. I love what Joe said about having that through line of being able to see where is funding coming from through to like what is being funded, and then as Tom was getting at, like what are we really achieving? How does that then connect back to the strategy that we've set for the organization? So really, thanks so much for walking us through that. And let's pivot over to talk about the same topic, portfolio management and impact measurement, but in a totally different context, albeit just down the road in London with World Animal Protection. So over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Zach. So let's start on about us. So just for the quick intro of who we are World Animal Protection. Our vision is a world where animals live free from cruelty and suffering. Our mission is to move the world to protect animals, which means that we are a campaigning organization primarily. We have offices in 14 countries, work in more than 50 countries. collaborating with local communities, non-governmental organizations and governments to passionately, responsibly and sustainably change animals' lives for the better. We also act for animals at global level, using our voice to put animal welfare on the global agenda so that we can show that what's good for animals is good for the world. And together we are changing the way the world works to end animal cruelty and suffering forever. So the background and need for us in having this database solution is that until about 2020, we were relying, much like Elton John AIDS Foundation, on manual reporting processes in Word and Excel. That gave us very limited flexibility with our data, and there was also only 4 points in the year when it was collated and available, and the point at which it became available, a bit similar to Zak was saying, was several months after the event. So we would get it out maybe 2 months after the quarter often. And in addition to that, the data itself was quite limited. It was very hard to update it or correct it, and it wasn't very easy to understand. So this picture that I have here is one of our old quarterly reporting documents. So you can see that it's quite long. It's got a whole bunch of tables in the middle, which were where the data, the kind of different statuses of achieving indicators and targets were, along with a lot of narrative that you can see around here and the pictures and everything. So it was the functional multi-tool of reporting. So I like to say it did a lot of things okay, but it didn't really do any one thing well. On top of that, we also didn't have a global stakeholder management platform. So if we were engaging with all of the organizations that we work with, NGOs, governments, corporates, all sorts of different stakeholders, they would be captured in here in a very loose way. So you would never be able to access a system and see what conversation or what engagement have we got with this particular stakeholder. You could kind of pick through a report to find it, but it was not easy to find. So that is particularly challenging for us as a campaigning organization, but work with a lot of stakeholders across a lot of different issues. So that really clearly defined our need for a database to support our programmatic work. And that was identified as early as 2015, but it was subject to a pretty long journey and a fairly long procurement process to get us to the point where we settled on AMP Impact and then did all the research scoping and then started working together in about 2019. So the solution that we have, and we have just completed our full migration just at the end of, at the beginning of October last month, is a stakeholder management and campaign management platform primarily, with sort of all of the other wonderful features that come with AMP Impact. And that is for our user base of around 90 to 100 of our program staff. So at the moment it is only for the programs team, and it manages both the kind of quantitative, qualitative data that comes out of campaigns, and then also being Salesforce naturally has that ability to run the CRM side of things. So we also use it to bring together our stakeholder management, which is really effective because we can actually have engineered crossover points where the stakeholder management actually translates into the campaign results. So having it all in the same environment is really, really helpful. And it makes a big difference. This that I've shown is one of our dashboards showing sort of high level progress across our, different campaigns. So this has been really well received so far. It allows us to interact with and access our data in a much more dynamic way. It's much more transparent. It can be tailored to different audiences. So what I've got for you there, what I'm showing at the moment is a very high level dashboard, but we can make them super specific. They are interactive. The fact that you can click on elements of these charts and then be taken to the source of the data was brand new for us. We've never had that kind of accessibility of our information before. So it really took us away from those manual processes, and it's made us a lot more efficient. And that unlocks the time to actually do more analysis into the data that we have and to see where we can streamline our processes rather than being caught up in the very manual aspect of just getting the data in. Once the data is far more accessible to us, we can actually do a lot more with it. We were also super limited on how we could kind of shape and represent that data. So having something as powerful as the AMP Impact Salesforce solution makes a huge difference in what we can actually do with the information that we have. So some of the benefits of this, which I've already kind of explained, but The transparency and accessibility of data has just changed massively. We can do things that we were never able to do before. For example, those paper documents that I showed a screenshot of, no way to add one of those against the other and see them both together. Obviously, in this solution, we can see different quarters, we can go into previous years. It's all stored there, so it's much easier to find things. It has added efficiency to those involved in all stages of reporting, so not just people who were responsible for kind of collation or inputting data, but also the people who are using it. So many efficiencies have been made all through the process, which, as I said, unlocks time to do more critical thinking around your information, rather than just being very kind of consumed with the actual collection and inputting of it, and it leaves you with less time for reflection. Another benefit is that ability to create those different views and to look at our data in different ways, depending on audiences and their needs. I have to say, certainly from my perspective, the ability to actually interact with a data set is so powerful, and it really allows you to interact with and play with the data that you have and see it in different ways. And that is what allows the sort of deeper learning and observations and insights, because if you have a single view, it doesn't tell you as much as if you have one view and then you look at it another way, and you interact with it and you tweak elements of it, and that will really help you understand it more deeply. We also obviously have this fully connected stakeholder management system that is built into our campaign management system. Can't undervalue that. And obviously, as a natural CRM product, it is really well equipped to keep track of interactions and our engagements with individuals and stakeholders at a very, very detailed level. And for some of our country offices who are, engaging with lots and lots of different people, they're super busy, and they were really desperate for a solution to be able to document and organize all of the little interactions that they had, to have this and to then be able to build custom reports that allow them to see it, that can group them, that can kind of filter through certain keywords, has been huge for them as well. So we had a lot of ugly spreadsheets sitting around the organization that were trying to organize various things in relation to our stakeholder management. And so to bring that all into the same, properly designed environment that AMP Impact and Vera Solutions created for us has been, a huge help. So really positively engaged with on that front. Some reflections and learnings, certainly as I have been rolling out this project this year, and we are pretty early in the journey. We have only just gotten everyone into this system. So it's a really critical time in terms of embedding it fully. And that change takes time. There are changes that came from the way we worked before to using this tool, and it is a really powerful tool, so it can be overwhelming at times. And it's giving yourselves the time to understand that and to work through it. And change will also happen even in the course of your development and rollout. Another thing that we've definitely learned is that prioritization is really, really essential. Make sure you know your scope, know what it is you want to do, and then really stick to that. So we sometimes you have to make tough decisions. So we kind of at one point decided, are we going to try and migrate our historical projects onto this system? But because our data was in such a poor condition before, I basically took the call. I said, look, this is not a solution for us to be looking backwards. This is a solution for us to look forwards. So the amount of work that would have gone into trying to bring in our back catalogue of projects in would have been really a really big drain on time and energy and resource, and it would have taken up a lot of work. So rather than do that, we were like, let's look forwards, let's prioritize. And actually, we don't want this for the past, we want it for the future. So it's really important to kind of stick to that as well, especially with something that can do a lot of things. It can be easy to go in different directions. So really staying the course definitely helps, especially if you're making quite a big jump from where you were to where you're trying to be. Another thing in terms of looking forwards as well, exact duplication of your existing systems, it's not always going to be the right thing to do, particularly ways that you've been working for a long time or that are very reliant on older tools and things that are not fully equipped to do what they do. A table in a Word document is not a data management tool. And so there are some things that we used to do that we didn't replicate, that I consciously chose for us to not replicate in the system, because sometimes the way you do things is informed or limited by the tool, the kind of tools that you have to do it. Whereas with a new tool, with this database, we were saying, okay, so actually, what would be the best way to do this within the context of the new tool that we have, rather than being guided by, well, we used to do it exactly like this. So there are opportunities where you're going to go with the grain by actually looking at how this tool can be used best in, you know, the new tool, rather than just going, oh, well, we need an exact copy of what we used to do. As I mentioned already, new systems, especially anything that is as complex and has as much potential as AMP Impact, can be kind of overwhelming. Certainly when I'm onboarding new users, I am very conscious that it is very easy to overwhelm them, especially people who have probably not used a database before, or have some experience with databases, but a lot of our campaigners have not used something like this before. So keep it simple. I try my best to simplify things as much as possible at every single stage. It can be really easy to go, well, you can decide anything, you can do what you want, and it's really about what you think's best. And sometimes people don't want to have to try and think of that, they just want to be told, tell me how it should be done. So really streamlining it, keeping it simple, and understanding ways of helping people understand the environment of a relational database without needing to teach them about a relational database. So one example that we have is stakeholders and contacts. So those are two of our objects, stakeholders being some kind of organization, and then contacts being the individuals who work for them. So the difference between them is quite hard for our users to grasp sometimes, because they're like, we often refer to contacts as a stakeholder. Stakeholder engagement often means talking to a group of people, but in the database environment, a stakeholder has a different meaning to a specific contact. How do I explain this to people? Well, I say that stakeholders aren't alive. Contacts are people and they're alive. So it's little things like that, rather than trying to teach them, well, this object is this and that object is that. Simplify it to the highest possible degree, and you can ask yourself, okay, is this alive? The UN ambassador for so-and-so, is he alive? Okay, that's a living person, great. But the ministry of a particular government is not alive, so it's a stakeholder. Little things like that. So keeping it simple, trying to break it down. Finally, the more time spent using a tool, the better we become at using it. So even my example that I just gave took me about 7 months to figure out. So don't try to go for 100% right away, because it's just not possible to get 100% all at once. Start small, and if I've learned anything with a project of this kind, it's that the knowledge builds and builds and builds. So you start small, and by the time you've mastered that first bit that you're trying to wrap your head around, understanding the next part is going to be easier, and then the next part is easier, and then the next and the next. So by going at it that way, you really build and accumulate the knowledge without pressuring yourself to think that everything has to be understood right now. And it really is a time spent issue, where the more time you spend using it, the easier it gets, and you can kind of look back and think, 6 months ago I never would have been able to wrap my head around this, and now it's super easy. So you don't try and do it all at once. It really does take time. I think that's it for me.
Awesome. That's great stuff. Thanks so much. That last point really resonates a lot as somebody who's been like living and breathing on Salesforce for 15 years. But we run our whole company on Salesforce, and you really when you're building out a solution that is going to be core to what you're doing as an organization, you really want to think of it as a long-term investment, right? It's gonna continue to get, if you're doing it right, it's going to continue to get better and better. And it's important to build capacity internally, not just among the users, which you talked about, but also in the ability to manage and adapt, to adapt the system as well. So some great insights there. I loved also your point around the value in being able to tailor the experience a bit to the different types of users, so that people can see, different folks can kind of get what what they're looking for out of the tool. Another theme I think between the two presentations that we saw was kind of breaking down silos. We saw with World Animal Protection this, well, in both cases, kind of a document-oriented approach before, where all that data is kind of buried in these documents. Steph's example of stakeholder information, our touch points with the different stakeholders buried somewhere in those documents. But out of this, we get, in both cases, you get a central source of truth that connects to different functions. It's not just a campaign management tool. It's also CRM and stakeholder management in the case of World Animal Protection. It's not just a grant making system in the case of EJAF. It's also an impact measurement tool at monitoring evaluation, but it's also connected to the finance system and drives, approval of payments and that side of the organization. So really neat example. So we've got some good questions coming into the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. I'll read off a couple that have come in, and we can see who wants to take them. And I'll stop my screen share so that we can look at each other. So Gerald asks, I don't have any experience with Salesforce, and I'm curious to know what scale of enterprise it is suited to, just larger ones or smaller enterprises as well. Maybe Tom, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, we're bigger than we've ever been now. We've got about 20, 25 people. But when we started with Salesforce, we were a lot smaller. We were about 10, 11 people. So it's really what you want it to be, which I know is a pretty simple answer, but it really is that. And Zak can talk more to, some of the other organizations that are run AMP Impact and are much bigger in scale. And, World Animal Protection, it seems like, they have 15 offices. It's a much bigger operation, but it really is what you want it to be. We've sort of customized AMP Impact and are utilizing it based on a small team. I'm the only person doing this type of work. We have another person who kind of leads on our young people work. It's really sort of built for a close-knit team, but it's equally a product that you can sort of scale and scale down as you wish. I think that's sort of speaks to the flexibility of it. So for us, it's work, but I'm sure much bigger organizations do a lot more with it. But I think that's down to you, really.
Yeah, I mean, clients of ours range, really all shapes and sizes, from community-based organizations around sub-Saharan Africa to massive international organizations and funders managing, billions of dollars a year of programs and grants. And I think we find the platform actually can work great for any kind of organization. What you need to keep in mind is that it's going to take, it does take some investment to get it to do what you need it to do as an organization. So, I wouldn't look at Salesforce as like, install and start using it on day one. There are some great tools from salesforce.org, like the Nonprofit Success Pack and the Program Management Module. Looks like we have a question in the feed about those, which we can cover in a minute. But there's some great tools that can help you get up and running more quickly and kind of accelerate the time to go live, and which AMP Impact also can be really helpful on that front. But it isn't really like I wouldn't say Salesforce is really a plug and play kind of solution. You really want to take the time to design out what are your processes, whether you're small and your processes are simple, or whether you're really large and you're going to have extensive business process diagrams. What are the key processes that we're running as an organization? What are the different kinds of data that we need to manage, and to then go from there? And I do think whether working with Vera or another partner, there's a great ecosystem of Salesforce partners with specialization in the nonprofit sector. Having a partner that knows the platform well, I think is a good suggestion, generally speaking. Another attendee asked if panelists could share what their favorite reports or dashboards are, and how they use them to demonstrate their impact, or what kind of data are being pulled. So maybe we can hear from each organization. Steph, I think after that question got asked, we saw an example dashboard in your presentation. Do you want to maybe start there?
Yeah, I was excited too, because I really love the dashboard features. So I have to say my favorite, which is a little unexpected, and it's actually a dashboard that cuts maybe 2 different reports about 6 different times each. It's a bit of a monster, but I'm really fond of it because it actually comes off of our stakeholder management system, not the campaign reporting. And it's a way of representing all of the different engagements that we have, and we also require a definition of what it is. So we want someone to do something, we're a campaigning organization, and we have to define what it is we want them to do. And so I have this series of very colorful charts, and we have kind of 4 stages, like a pipeline, in terms of how we're getting them from the point of not having done it to having done the thing. And so this is a series of charts that shows all of these different factors cut in a bunch of different ways. So whether it's the stakeholder themselves, whether it's the specific ask, what stage it's at, what country office owns the relationship, what campaign it's from, and it's got a series of filters at the top for even things like, is this an institution? Is this a government? Is this a corporate? And you can combine these filters and deep dive into this dashboard and see some really interesting things. And it excites me because it visualizes data that we've never had access to before. So that's one of my personal favorites, just because it's a bit different and it comes off the part of the system that you wouldn't expect to have like a dashboard off it. I was making some dashboards today as it happens. I find it hard to resist on a lot of occasions, but some of the things that have been really successful, and actually these aren't even my dashboards now, I've taught some project managers in my organization how to make them. I started with the original one, but it's a single campaign and it's a view of the campaign's kind of key results, so targets and results. We do something called a RAG status, which is a red, amber, green kind of status for achieving a target. And then it's even got activity reporting built in alongside it as well. So that's not a chart, that's actually a text-based data report. But those dashboards are really, really popular, because something that I would tell people earlier in this process was, oh, well, there's no one document solves it all, shows you everything solution. It's part of the change management, because we were used to these like documents that did everything. And so I would say, oh, well, you have to go to specific places to see specific things. You need to look at different reports. And then I realized that the see it all in one place solution is the dashboard. So we've actually then replaced reports that could be 30 pages with this one dashboard, but because you can interact with the data, that is then what the head of that campaign looks at to sign off their data as well. So those internally have been super popular as well. And even some things like percentage achievements. And I have to give a shout out to the thematic areas, because I've only just started playing with those in dashboards, and you can actually do things like cut your data. Our thematic areas, things like lobbying and advocacy, education, mobilization, and you can cut them by that area and then look at the percentages. So that gives you some really interesting views as well. And we're actually hoping to use the thematic areas more in future as well. So those are just some of my favorites.
Underrated AMP Impact feature there. Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great insights there, Steph. And we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in now, which is great to see. So we can kind of lightning around this a bit. Maybe Tom or Joe, if you want to maybe connect that an answer to that question to Madeline's question around metrics, or what kind of indicators or KPIs, I think is what you guys call them at EJAF. You want to give kind of a couple examples of KPIs that you're using, or those higher level goals?
Yeah, sure. I guess our reporting is slightly different because, as I say, we've integrated with Power BI, which gives us reporting across the organization. And my views are probably slightly different from, say, Tom's view, because I do a lot more back-end reporting. So for things like finance integration, our payments and things like that, as Zach said, we can push them through Salesforce. So I probably look at more payment reports, things like that. But what we've managed to do is to aggregate our KPIs based on, say, things like geographic area, gender, things like that. And you can see these reports on the bottom left here, that our main top level KPIs, I guess, are HIV tests, engaged on ARV and retained on ARV. So we have a report across the whole grants organization that shows those reports, which is just a good top level view. I wouldn't say this is my favorite report, because it doesn't really give you enough detail. We can go into much more granular detail based on things like, as you can see on the left hand side, we can limit it to specific grant managers. We can also narrow it down to which campaign we're sort of focusing on, or we call them strategic portfolios. And then, yeah, you can filter it down by geographic area and then by specific KPI. So we can do a lot of powerful reporting through Power BI. And I hate to badge on about Power BI when it's not AMP Impact, but we actually build these reports first of all off of the grant system. So I usually will create the base report, and then we can tailor that over in Power BI to be a bit more visually different for our higher level meetings and things like that. But also we get that broader view from, as I say, from fundraising to finance and then to grants. So that's why we use Power BI for larger reporting. So I wouldn't really say I have one favorite report or dashboard, because we have many.
Cool. No, that's great. And yeah, I mean, we've designed AMP to really work with whatever intelligence analytics tool an organization might be using, whether that's native Salesforce reports and dashboards, Power BI, Tableau CRM. We've got, we're kind of playing bingo of business intelligence tools there. And that's, that's kind of our philosophy there, is to make sure we play well with everything. I can answer a couple of just quick ones. Nigel had asked, how does AMP Impact compare to the Salesforce.org Nonprofit Success Pack, Program Management Module, Volunteers for Salesforce, or V4S? So Nonprofit Success Management, Nonprofit Success Pack, or NPSP, is a free offering from Salesforce.org that is really geared at fundraising, in particular individual fundraising. So you wouldn't use NPSP to do project management or really portfolio management. You would use it to manage donations and kind of a pipeline of donors, donations, perhaps recurring donations. Volunteers for Salesforce is a tool for handling volunteer engagement, so managing kind of volunteers, signing up and allocating them to slots. And then the program management module sounds similar by name, but it's actually really geared at tracking service delivery. And there's also a case management tool on top of the PMM. Program management module really is for individual participants and their engagement in different programs or services, and each service that gets delivered to each participant. It actually plays really, really nicely with AMP Impact, because you can use AMP Impact to manage the portfolio, define the metrics, set targets, track results. AMP Impact can aggregate data up from the PMM as well, but then you might use the PMM data to track each individual participant and their engagement. Not exactly relevant with EJAF or World Animal Protection in these cases, but we do have other clients that are using both. Great, we have 1 minute left. So let's see, we had, I think, Tom, there's a question, or sorry, Joe, there's a question about time for financial integration. I know that took some time. Any wisdom to share on that front?
Wisdom, take your time, I would say, with it. Make sure you have your business processes thought through, but also communicate internally with your own team. Any questions, or our motto, I guess, at the minute is don't be afraid to ask a stupid question. Because it's always the best one to answer, because it should be easy enough for us to answer. But generally communicating internally with your own team, and then being able to understand what it is you're looking for, what it is you want to do as your overall end products, and then be able to communicate that to the experts that will do the work, or a lot of the work, like Zak and Hasti's, for us at least, making sure you can communicate clearly with them what it is they look for. But our experience with them has been great, that anything we haven't thought about or haven't gone into enough depth on with them, they'll generally collaborate with us on that. So it's obviously a team partnership that you need to work together on that, but internal business process clarification is the best one for you, because then you know what validations you need to put in place, what security checks you'll need on your users if you are changing things within the system for different sets of users, things like that. But those are my key pieces of wisdom, I guess. And I just say, if something goes wrong, you can't foresee every possible error that is likely to show up. It's just not possible. So don't be harsh on yourself. I know I have been. So
that's a great note to end on. And I'm conscious we're at time. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. A big thanks to Tom, Joe, and Steph for sharing your nuggets of wisdom and your journeys that you've been on and that you're on, and a big congratulations to you all on the great work that you're doing and that your organizations are doing. So big thanks to everybody. We'll wrap it there. And if folks want to get in touch, certainly do so with LinkedIn. You can reach out to us on our website at verasolutions.org. And I suppose the rest of the panelists, if folks want to connect, find Tom, Joe, and Steph on LinkedIn. I'm sure they would love to chat with you.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you so much, Zak, for inviting us as well. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.